وحسينا 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 وحسينا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Our series of discussions go into a second night. Yesterday, we were looking at the haqiqah of what these 10 nights symbolize. These 10 nights encapsulate the entire philosophy of life. And as you begin the first, it's an evolution of the heart. An entire maraj can take place in these 10 nights for an individual, if only they understand. The purpose of coming here now is not just reading and writing and hearing. Actually, the most important thing is this. It's the journey of the heart and the journey of wilayah. It's the idea of nur. Each one of you inside of you possesses a light. The problem is, though, that in this world what happens is that the physical world, the movement of this life, business, work, family, everything that is, which is all important. The problem, though, is it sometimes masks that nur. And you notice that all of this is a distraction. The pain that you have in your life as well sometimes distracts you away from Allah. And the other issue is this: because we can't actually see Allah, we forget that Allah exists. It's all well and good to say, look at the signs of God, but let's be honest, none of us really look at the signs of God on a daily basis. So there's one institution, and that institution is the institution of Syed al-Shuhada. That in these 10 nights, there's a risk that is coming from Alam al-Quds. And that risk is not restricted just for Shias either. For any human being who comes into the majlis of Imam Hussein, there's a risk which is there. For that person who comes every night, they take that risk and they go. For those person who comes one night, you'll get partial risk. For those people who miss these 10 nights, that risk will never come back in this lifetime. There's a risk every year that Allah sends. And that's what's important. How can we access that risk? That risk is not accessed just by your hands and your feet. That risk is accessed by your heart. And this is why you've come here. This is why you're brought here. And look, just understand this as well, that the invitation of Sayyid al-Shuhada is for everyone. Imam Hussein himself is so merciful, is so Kareem, is so Rahman, that this is open for everyone. You know, you may notice, we have an issue if somebody may not be from our faith who comes into the center. Sayyid al-Shuhada doesn't have an issue at all. If you look, I've seen myself and you've seen, whether you're Hindu, atheist, Christian, Jew, Muslim, Sunni, Shia, Hussein ibn Ali's doors open and anyone can go to Imam Hussein. It doesn't matter who you're from, in what journey you're from, in what part of life you're from. And I've seen people from all levels who go to Sayyid al-Shuhada, regardless of who they are. I remember a number of years ago when Shri Shri Ravi Shankar came to Edinburgh. At the time, my team went to see him. So the first thing he said to them was this: do you go to Karbala? I've been 3 times. Did Hussein ibn Ali close the door? He said, no, come to me. Whoever you are, whichever walk of life you're from. Why? Because Hussein is Kareem, and his mother is Kareem, and his father is Kareem. Hussein isn't just the Imam of me and you. Hussein is the nur of Allah that shines all over Alam al-Wujud. Why? because Hussein's mother is that source that Allah reflects His light. Remember, Allah is known for a wasila. Directly, if Allah was to come down, it would burn the entire universe. When we say in the Quran, Allahu nur as-samawati wal ard, there are three stages here. Allah nur and samawati wal ard. Nur is singular, everything else is plural. Allah's first tajalli that shines up all of creation is known as Fatima az-Zahra alayhi salam. Like, I'm going to develop this discussion. I'm not just going to leave it like that. There's a deep philosophy behind this. This philosophy of what I'm saying of Allahu nuru samawati wal ard begins at the beginning of creation. For that, we have to go back to some of our traditions. Some of those books which were around in the time of the 11th Imam mention, for example, Basar al-Darajat. We'll mention a couple of traditions and then move on. All of this begins at a particular stage, and that is the creation of Adam itself. If you want to truly understand what Ahlul Bayt are, you've got to understand the story of Adam. And at the moment, I'm trying not to begin it because it's going to take me at least 2 sessions to cover it. But we'll get on to that. And this links in particular with Fatimiyya. Just remember this. The reason why, if you look at Ayn Nur, right? If you look at Ayn Nur, and every dua which is to do with Nur, why it pertains back to Zahra alayhi salam is this. Is because she is the light. She is Nafs Kulli. And she is Nur of Allah on earth. That wherever she shines, you find existence. Now when I say this, I'm not talking about the physical. I'm talking about the batin of a person. In the way that you find light shines from outsides and makes everything munawwar, there's a light inside that gives wujud as well. And this is why the Urafa have said, Nafs Kulli, where all of the nufus, all of your souls go back to a mother soul. And that soul is the soul of Zahra. If we had time, we'd discuss it, and we will discuss it because it's an important topic in the next coming nights. I touched on this in 2015 in Fatimiyya. Didn't have time to complete it, but I will definitely complete it as these nights go on. Just remember this. There's a reason why we believe in Ahlul Bayt. There's a reason why the Prophet is important. Otherwise, Allah sent 124,000 prophets if we look at that tradition. Or in another tradition by Allama Majlisi, 320,000. However many prophets He sent, if you look at the deen, it was complete. Right? You had Tawheed, Ibrahim. You had Sharia, Musa. You had spirituality, Isa. What is the purpose of our Prophet then coming? The purpose essentially is this, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأَتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. But what is makaram al-akhlaq? It's not just shaking somebody's hand or smiling at them. Makaram al-akhlaq is balancing the asma al-husna inside of your heart. All of the names of Allah found inside of you. Let me give you an example. When you're kind to somebody, when you show mercy, it goes back to Allah. If Allah wasn't merciful, you wouldn't have the ability to be merciful. When you give and you become jawad for the day within your small capacity, it's because Allah is, otherwise you wouldn't know how to do that. If you show anger, for example, and there's an imbalance, because remember, we commit many sins because of an imbalance. We're angry because of imbalances. Here, Prophet came to balance everything, to make sure that you have the right amount. It's like when you take a vitamin tablet. Some people may have 110% vitamin D, 0% vitamin C. All of these things that you're meant to have, the purpose is you're balanced. In the same way the soul requires balancing. The purpose of the Prophet was to come and as Ahlul Bayt to balance the soul. And when a human being is balanced, then he shows mercy in the way that it should be shown, shows love in the way that it should be shown, shows justice in the way that it should be shown. But there's another component to this. Allah may contain all of these, but none of us would understand until Ahlul Bayt are not here. This is why the 6th Imam alayhi salam says, Nahnu asma'il husna. We are the beautiful names of Allah. If Hussein ibn Ali in Karbala doesn't show Rahmaniyya, no one would know how to become Rahman. And if he doesn't show Kareem, and if he doesn't show forgiveness, and if he doesn't show love, and if he doesn't show all of these things, we wouldn't understand what it is. Why? Because Allah Himself is not going to come down and show you. But what Allah is going to send is Khalifatullah. And the purpose of that Khalifa, when He speaks to the angels and He says, Inni ja'alun fil ard al Khalifa. Why is that? The purpose of leaving a Khalifa is what? Somebody who demonstrates all those qualities of Allah in physical form. I'm not saying they become Allah, but what you're saying is this: they become a manifestation of what Allah stands for. Otherwise, we just wouldn't know. What is shaitan? Shaitan, yes, is complete darkness, but even within shaitan there's light as well. Had there not been light, it'd be non-existent. Even within shaitan there's a small amount of mercy as well. I'll give you an example. Now that we're on this, I wasn't going to discuss this at all. See this water that's with me? 3 names of Allah come to make this water: Latif, Hay, and Rahman. 3 names come. For example, you have water. Rahman is that thing which is found in all shay. Shaitan has a Rahman in him. Small amount, but he does. Qahar, Jabbar, Mutakabbir, Mudhil, all of these things come and make shaitan. Right? In the same way, when you look at the angels, Rahman, Subbuh, Quddus, 3 names come together, for example, to make the angels. Similarly, each one of us has different components of names. Muhammad and Al Muhammad al-Jami'. Every single name of Allah is found in them. So therefore, they're required to take examples from their life to balance us. This is why famously Ayatollah Hassan Zada Amali said, if you want to know the haqiqat of Ali, know the name Ali's Ism Adam itself. If a person says Ya Ali, there's enough in that, if they say it properly, to balance their own hearts, for their dua to become mustajab. In fact, to go back to the story of the Bani Israel, there's a particular story. Now that we're on this, let me tell you. One day Amir al-Mu'mineen is walking, comes to the river Euphrates. With him, there's a member of the Bani Israel. The hadith says he's Jewish, but it could have been Christian. As both of them are walking together, as you know, when a person's walking by themselves, you should accompany them. So Amir al-Mu'mineen is accompanying them. Comes to the bank of the Euphrates. This person looks to the Imam and smiles, because he knows what he's about to do. He smiles and he begins to walk over water. And as he walks over water, gets to the other side, smiles, looks, and he says, does your religion also teach you something like this? Amir al-Mu'mineen begins to smile. He says, watch this. My words now, not his, but watch this. Smiles, looks at the water. Hadith says the water turns into ice. Imam begins to walk. This person looks up and he asks him. He says, Mawla, how were you able to? He says, Ali, how were you able to do this? Or, oh person, how were you able to do this? In fact, at this stage, he doesn't know the Imam's name. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I'll tell you how I did it if you told me how you did it. So he replies and he says, and I challenge all of you to go back and look. He says, in the Old Testament, in the Torah, whenever any prophet had a problem, they would call the name Elia and they would go, and their problem would be resolved. Amir al-Mu'mineen smiles and he says, have you ever seen anyone claim to be Elia? He says, no. They've claimed to be the prophet of the last days, and they've claimed to be the Messiah, but no one to date has claimed to be Elia. Only one person on 2 occasions claimed. One was in the battle of Khaybar, and the other when he was walking. And as he walked, he turned around and he said, I am that alien, the Torah. You were calling upon me and I was helping you to walk across. Second was in the battle of Khaybar, when there was a discussion that takes place with the Najumi, and the Imam says, I'm that alien in the Torah. And I go and Google it and you'll see Elia, Torah. You see the names come up, right? So whenever a prophet or his wasi had a problem, they would call upon Elia. That tells you something. We're not just calling on the physical body of the Imam. This wilayah has a reality that began even before Alam al-Dhar. And this is why all of the maratib of wujud, different levels of existence, go back to that one light. And that light is the light of wilayah. So look, those are things that, now that we were discussing, I mentioned, but what I wanted to say was this, and this is where, let's begin our discussion. One day Amir al-Mu'mineen is walking, and in the process of walking, he's walking with Kumayl. The city is Kufa, or at the time it was one of the largest cities in that area. Kufa was developed by the second Khalifa, according to some historians. After that, it was used as a garrison. Anyhow, Imam moves. His Darul Khilafah comes over to Kufa. One night he's walking with Kumayl. Ibn al-Tawus has narrated this. There's a discussion that takes place between Amir al-Mu'mineen at the time and Kumayl. And he begins to tell him about the events of the future. As the discussion goes on, Imam says something to him. He says, look, after the death of my son Hussein, after he's going to be slaughtered, he says that the entire ummah is going to fall into dhalal and dhulamat. There's going to be darkness, there's going to be confusion. And as time goes on, that darkness and confusion is going to extend. Kumail becomes scared. He says, look, Mawla, if that last day comes, what's going to happen to me? From that moment, if I see that, and the darkness and the confusion continues. Similar question was asked to the Prophet like this. Here the Prophet was sitting with Ammar bin Yasir. He says, in this day there's one haqq and one batil. But in Akhir al-Zaman, Butlan, many different batils are going to be there. One haqq. Ammar begins to cry. He says, Ya Rasulullah, if I make it until then, how am I going to know the truth? Answer was simple. Truth is like the sun. When the truth shines, it eclipses everything. Here there's an indication where Amir al-Mu'mineen indicates towards Imam Hussein. There's a reason why the 6th Imam has said that Hussein is what? Misbah al-Huda wa Safinatun Najat. There's a reason why. Because in times of confusion and darkness, when you notice that morality is messed up as it is today, we don't even know what haqq is and batil is anymore. And as time is going on, you're finding everything in the time of Dajjal. And again, we'll start from tomorrow what that concept means. But in the time of Dajjal, you'll see haqq and batil. In the olden days, if you ask some of our parents who are sitting here, our grandparents who are sitting here, that era, it was very obvious. Haqq, batil. Do this, refrain from this. Do this, refrain from this. Today in the 21st century, what you're finding all of a sudden is there's this gray area. Everything has come to such a mix that we don't know what haqq and batil is. In the olden days, music haram. Today, this way, in the olden days, this is haram, this is halal. Today, multiple different excuses. Now remember this, and remember these words. When the Prophet of God was saying that 10 times Jibreel is going to come after me, somebody asked. They said, is Jibreel ever going to come after you? He says, yes, 10 times. Prophet lists every time. He says, one time is going to come when he's going to take mercy away from the earth. When the doors of Rahmah are going to close. So somebody asked him, they said, Ya Rasulullah, why are the doors of Rahmah going to close? He says, because people are going to stop repenting. Why are people going to stop repenting? Because they're going to make excuses for everything that they do. In the olden days, when a person did wrong, he says, look, I've done wrong, hands up. They were a man about it. He's like, I've done wrong, I've done wrong. In this day, we justify everything. When we justify haram, then what happens? Tawfiq of tawbah is taken away. Remember, this is very critical. One cannot move any of the stages of spirituality because the second bab, after bab al-yaqda, is bab al-tawbah. If tawbah's door is finished, then you will never get to the truth. And here what happens? Bab al-rahmah closes because of one reason. Why? When we start justifying it, you don't put your hands up to yourself. I'm not talking about the people. Admit to yourself at least, I was wrong. That's why they say, look, you may lie to everybody else, and it's haram to lie, but don't ever lie to yourself. Because if you do, shaitan has overcome you. That means shaitan will block all of that light which is coming in. And when we start the discussion from Adam and we go forward to Dajjal, you'll see where shaitan hits you. You've got to know where shaitan hits you. Otherwise, if you don't know your enemy, you're not going to know how to overcome him. There's a way shaitan begins. And we'll look at it stage by stage, but he comes up, he hits you in the wahan first. And how he develops, we'll look at it. But the most important thing at this stage, what I'm going to say is this. Be very vigilant in the last days. Because when we start justifying it, Bab al-Tawbah closes. When Bab al-Tawbah closes, then what happens? Mercy of Allah closes. When the mercy of Allah closes, then what happens? Veil upon veil, darkness upon darkness upon darkness. However, there's one nuskha. There's one way of breaking all of that. What is it? We said yesterday. The tears that you shed for Imam Hussein burns the najasat of the heart. And this is why, if you notice, Ayatollah Marashi Najafi would say continuously, cry over Hussein, even if it was a tear. Human beings, those urafah who have got to a maqam in this world, have got to a maqam because of the tears that they shed. Look, I'm going to give you a story to emphasize this. You could recite a salawat, please. salawat, please.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Ayatollah Sistani, our grand marja, had a teacher, imagine this, by the name of Sheikh Mujtaba Qazwini. It's an important story to bear in mind, and you'll see why. Sheikh Mujtaba Qazwini was one of the great urafa of Mashhad. He was a man who had Isma Azam. Right? So somebody wants to ask him, how did you gain this Isma Azam? Isma Azam is the greatest name of Allah. Now Isma Azam is not just words, it's a hal, it's a state of being. Isma Azam itself is a state of being. This is why when we said Ali himself is Isma Azam, is because it's a state of being. It's not just a name. You may notice sometimes when you're in that hal, your dua is accepted. You could recite every nuskha in the world, but if you're not in that hal, dua doesn't connect. Dua connects when you find that you're in that hal. So let me give you an example. Many a time when you go to Karbala, if you've had a heavy meal and they serve you 7-10 courses, so just before you go to do ziyarah, if you have those 10 courses, you are in no hal whatsoever to even say salam to Imam Hussain. Right? So one of the things that destroys hal is overeating. So you can imagine how sensitive it is. Isma Azam itself is a hal. When a person worships Allah, gets to a stage, Ahlul Bayt themselves put a nur in their heart, which makes them actualize this Isma Azam. Sheikh Mujtaba Qazwini said, he says, my teacher showed me the way of getting it. Who's this teacher? Ayatollah Sayyid Musa Zarabadi. Look, you've all heard of Sayyid Ali Qadi, but the one person who's not mentioned is Sayyid Musa Zarabadi. Sayyid Musa Zarabadi is one of those urafa who died at the age of 59. And because he was 59 years old, people didn't know much about him. But if you look at people like Allama Hafiziyan, his teacher, Musa Zarabadi. Mujtaba Qazwini, his teacher, Musa Zarabadi. Hashim Qazwini, another teacher of Ayatollah Sistani in Mashhad. His teacher, Sayyid Musa Zarabadi. And I remember myself once, when I was speaking to the eldest son of Ayatollah Bahjad, and I asked him, who did your father rate? In essence, in our language, as we say, who did you rate? His reply was that my father used to say, Musa Zarabadi was Sahib Karamat. So this Sayyid Musa Zarabadi, they say that his students will say, and for those people, for example, who spent time, any time at the subcontinent, you'd have heard of Hafiziyan. I remember once I was in Toronto sitting there, and a person, elder gentleman came to me and said, Hafiziyan used to live in our house from Bombay. We went to Karachi after the creation of Pakistan. He went to Karachi. And he said to me that we with our own eyes used to see Hafiziyan walk on water. He said we were younger, but we used to see him pray on water and used to whisper something. When the whispering stopped, you could see him sinking. And when he used to recite, he used to come back again. Hafiziyan's karamat are famous, by the way. So for those people who are from Mashhad or from that area, you'd have heard of Hafiziyan's karamat. He died in 1980. All of the people who were wearing Hirza Jawad, the first ever Hirza Jawad that was made into a ring was by Hafiziyan. Right. Otherwise, the actual Hirza Jawad is tied on the arm. That ring form that was made by Allama Hafiziyan. And there are many karamat of his, which we don't have time to go to. His first teacher was a guy called Nukudik Isfahani, who's very famous. His a'mal are very famous. After he graduated from Nukudik Isfahani, they say Mujtaba Qazwini took Hafiziyan and took him to Sayyid Musa Zarabadi. Hafiziyan himself says, when I went and I saw Musa Zarabadi, I felt like a drop in front of an ocean. You know, this is that man, they say that towards the end of his life, he could look at the sun and he could see the muwakkilin of the sun. As you know, every single thing has a muwakkil. He could taskhir, he had the power to control even the muwakkilin of the sun. And after he died, Sayyid Musa Zarabadi, people came out to say that, look, for example, one man said, he said that I'd never been to ziyarah. So the Jami Masjid in Qazwin, over there, Sayyid Musa Zarabadi would lead the prayers. He says, one day I was crying, so Sayyid Musa asked me, he said, look, what's the problem? He said, I've never been to Karbala. He said, don't worry, come tomorrow. He says, I came the next day. Sayyid Musa finishes his fajr, finishes his taqibat. He says to me, let's go for a walk. He says, where are you taking me? He says, close your eyes. closes his eyes. He says, 2 steps later, where were we? Karbala. He said, I did ziyarah of Karbala, and then I came back. So we asked him, he says, look, why didn't you take me to Najaf? He says, had you asked me, I would have taken you. That's Sayyid Musa Zarabadi, the teacher of the teacher of Ayatollah Sistani. In fact, there was a case, similar story, in the time of the Shah, the first Shah. When Shah Iran, the first Shah, Reza Shah, he said, look, round up everyone, because as you know, there was a hijab ban. He says, look, round up all the mullahs, put them all in jail. So they said that the Shah's men came and they took Sayyid Musa Zarabadi, took him into jail. Who's telling me this? Ayatollah Behçet's son. He says that they took, and so hence, a person like that. So he says they took Musa Zarabadi to jail. So Sayyid Musa Zarabadi was smiling. He says, can you bring me a pencil and a paper? So they brought him a pencil and a paper. So he said to one of the guards, he says, bring your superior, bring your general. So the guy came. He says, you see that bird? He started to draw a bird. So he drew the bird. He says, you see that bird? He says, yeah. He says, bring me a scissors. Brought him a scissors. Cut the neck on the paper. He says, look up. The bird's head fell to the ground. He said, tell the Shah that I know this as well. Straight away, within a couple of hours, hukum was given, release him. We don't want to mess with this guy. Said Mujtaba Qazwini comes to Sayyid Musa Zarabadi. It's about 2 of them. They said, Allah, tell us the ability to gain Ism A'zam. What does Sayyid Musa Zarabadi say now? This guy, who's at the pinnacle of his spirituality, he says, I'm going to give you a formula. If you can do this formula, whatever you want, you'll get this Ism A'zam. He says, what is it? He says, make sure the zaman and the makan is the same. Time, place needs to be the same. Fix a time, fix a place. Then he recites and he says, now recite Ziyarat Ashura. 100 la'ana, 100 salawat. Ziyarat Ashura itself is tawheedi. Why? In the same way that La ilaha illallah is tawalli, tabarri and then tawalli. In the same way Ziyarat Ashura is also tabarri and then tawalli. If anybody doubted in the fact that it's Hadith Qudsi or not, look at the formation of it itself and you'll see that it screams the fact that first we negate Masi Wallah, and then after that, when the heart is pure, then Hussein comes, then your flight comes towards Allah. But anyhow, he says Zaman and Makan, 100 lan, 100 salawat. Sayyid Musa Zarabadi said, his student Mujtaba Qazwini said, for 3 years, 1 Zaman, 1 Makan, 100 lan, 100 salawat continuously at that time, same clothes. There's certain sharait for this. It's not like you can recite it itlaq. People are reciting it for we can't have any children or ziyarta. Ziyarta Ashra is not for these things, by the way. Sometimes, because it's heavy, if you recite it for the wrong things, it doesn't have the best impact as well. There's other du'as for these things. Sometimes it's within our culture, you can't get married Ziyarta Ashra. Ziyarta Ashra is not going to help you when it comes to marriage. Ziyarta Ashra is for specific things, but one of those things, very lofty, is for Ism A'zam. Said Mujtaba Qazwini says that for 3 years I recited it with the sharait, the conditions that Sayyid Musa Zarabadi laid on me. He says, after 3 years, in a dream I saw Sayyid al-Shuhada himself come, and he gave me that Ism A'zam, that to the day that he died, he had the ability of Ism A'zam. One dua, one ziyarah that we think is menial. Why? Because we've got it on a plate. What we don't understand is that we've been given so many things for free. And because it's being given for free, we sit there discussing, is this okay to recite? Is this not okay to recite? Should we do this? I can't be bothered to do that. Brothers, know something. Ahlul Bayt is a treasure trove. They've given you things. If you understood what you have, you'd not only kiss it and put it on your head, but you'd busy yourself in reciting what Ahlul Bayt have given. The biggest treasure we have is the dua of Ahlul Bayt. These du'as that we have, nobody else has them. Tell me, does anybody else have dua Arafah of Imam Hussein? There's secrets behind this. There's a secret, for example, that people like Ayatollah Wahid al-Khurasani says that for the first 10 days of Muharram, recite Ziyad Ali Yasin. There's a secret behind that. There's a sir behind that. We need to know when to recite it, how to use it. It's important. Dua li Yasin develops that wilaya and that belief in the 12th Imam inside of you. You see, not everything is this. Many a time you can intellectually prove God, but you don't feel God. What's required is that yaqeen that comes when that veil is lifted. See, this is what's important. I'll give you an example, in fact. Look what Amir al-Mu'mineen says in Hadith al-Haqiqah, right? The Hadith of reality. When Kumail comes to him and asks him, Mawla, al-Haqiqah, what's Haqiqah? Stories in front of you. I'm just going to take 2 points. And if we had time, I would certainly take at least 10 lectures just to look at this Hadith al-Haqiqah. Amir al-Mu'mineen takes Kumail on a journey of 3 stages until that level where he strips him completely and takes him from maqam al-tawheed to maqam al-wahdat. Understand what I'm saying. It's not something light I've said. Every single prophet was told to take you to tawheed. Imam and Walaya take you from tawheed to wahdat. The purpose of the 12th Imam, therefore, is not just to come and teach you tawheed. Tawheed everybody else takes you to. The purpose of the Imam is take you to maqam al-wahdat. Now you can ask me the question, what does that mean? As I said, we need 10 lectures for that. Maqam al-wahdat is something else. Maqam al-wahdat is what is above this world. The different stages to get to that stage, that then you do mushahada with the dhat of Allah. That movement that goes batin of the batin of the batin of the batin of a person. Look, in an entire life, maybe if you've lived 100 years, the vast majority of people who have lived 100 years are still living in darkness. They've not understood that which is in the batin. And if I was to ask you today, do you think shaitan cares about your fasting? Shaitan wants you to fast. I'm going to say something now which is completely opposite to what you may have heard. Shaitan wants you to fast. Shaitan wants you to pray. Shaitan wants you to go on Hajj. Shaitan wants you to be good to your parents. All of those things. Why? Because when we do that, the vast majority of the world do it in darkness. There's no nur of wilaya there. What does it mean? Dead end. You're busying yourself like the Khawarij did. All night they were praying. All day they were fasting. Reading Quran and everything. But what happens? Where were the Khawarij? At the end of the day, their place is in the bottom pits of hell. Why? Because they went against Waliullah. Shaitan knows, therefore. He knows, busy them with prayers. Why? Because if they've not actualized the nur of wilaya, all of this is useless. And you'll find in Akhir Zaman, people will want to take you away from this wilaya. They'll put shak in your wilaya. Why is that? Remember this. Today is the sultanate of shaitan. Like I wasn't going to mention this, but I'll mention this as well. There are 2 names of Allah that all of time rotates around. Al-Basit, Al-Qabith. Expander, contraction. Entire human history is between these 2 things. There is time when shaitan is contracted. For example, in the time of the Prophet. There's time where his domain is there. Where do you see this? You see this in the time of Sulaiman. So what did Allah do? Allah made the shayateen physical so that Sulaiman could dominate upon them. But because shaitan knows you, and he knows your fathers and your grandfathers, the entire DNA of humanity he knows, because he's seen all of you, he knows all of the patterns, and he resides in a realm which is above yours. He can see human patterns. Because of that, if you look at some of the traditions of Akhir Zaman, you see that in the last days, the hukumat, the power will be in the hands of shaitan. It will be the governance of shaitan. It doesn't mean physically he's going to be here, no. If you look at the tradition, sometimes in the last days they say that even if a person comes with an idea, that idea is being inspired by shaitan. But you don't even know, you think it's a wonderful idea until it ends up killing millions of people. If you look at people like Einstein, he was crying after the atomic bomb. Why? He says, look how many people I've destroyed. In the same way, remember this, when Dajjal comes, he doesn't come with that which is haram. He comes with that which is mubah. Let me ask you a question, just for you to think on, and I'll move very quickly. Every one of you has a phone in your pocket. That phone has social media. The man who invented the iPhone didn't allow his children access. Why? It's mubah. But how many generations in the last 10 years, forget how many people have been corrupted in the last 10 years. Fitna and fasad has increased in 10 years more than it did in 100 years. Social corruption. Why? Because of that which is mubah. Now when you go to see Dajjal, what's the tool of Dajjal? Not haram and halal, that which is mubah. Why am I mentioning this? Sometimes an idea can be good, inspired by who? Shaitan. Sometimes the leaders inspired by shaitan. This is the time where you find as materialism increases, nur, the light, immaterial realm decreases in this world, our connection to that. When it decreases, whose hukumat is it today? In the world, hukumat of shaitan. You see oppression, but you're desensitized to it. People are being killed, pictures are being sent on a daily basis, but you're desensitized to it. Today, somebody could die on the street, you're desensitized to it. Both the Jewish tradition and Muslim tradition indicates to the fact that we're living in Akhir Zaman now. And one of these nights I'll go into Jewish tradition to give you all of the alamat al-dhuhur of the Mashiach, so you can compare our coming and their coming, see where it links up. In essence, we're all waiting for the same person to come, but we're waiting for goodness to prevail on earth. Remember this, therefore, shaitan knows you. But you know what the biggest thing shaitan is scared of? Azab Hussein. Why is that? Let me tell you it in a small story. In Iran, when the Hizb ut-Tuhda party, which was the communist party, in the olden days when they were taking over that Central Asia belt, and if you look at all those communist countries around in the olden days, Azerbaijan became communist, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, even parts of Afghanistan, you found that they weren't effective as much in Iran and Iraq as they should have been. So somebody asked once, one of their leaders, they said, what is it? How come you're not effective here? You know what his reply was? Beautiful reply. He says that we have 355 days of the year where we've just about converted these guys to communism. All of a sudden, these 10 days come from red, they all turn black again. Sayyid al-Shuhada in the last days is the most important institution. You can run in whichever direction you want. At the end of the day, the only preservation is the ziyarah of Hussein that you do. Is the humility in front of Imam Hussein. But more importantly, and bear this in mind, is the tears that you shed for Imam Hussein. There is nothing more powerful than these tears. And this is why Sayyidah Zainab's entire movement, you could say, was a revolution of the tears. Her buqa, after Karbala, created a revolution. Inqilab, qalb, qalaba, changed, even in the Latin, revolution, revolve. Revolve what? Hearts of the people. Hussein ibn Ali didn't go out to fight. That's a fallacy. He wasn't there to fight. He was there to change your hearts. If the battle was only with a sword, many people have fought with a sword. They would have said 2 princes have come to fight. What did Imam Hussein do? He did something. He changed the heart in such a way that until the day of judgment, whoever comes to this institution, they find that they're shaken. It can change you within a blink of an eye. How do you know that your majlis has been accepted? How do you know that your azah has been accepted? The same milak for ziyarah is the same milak here. What is it? If you were to get up and you leave here and you felt that something has changed inside of you for the better, know that your azah has been accepted. Similarly with the ziyarah of Imam Hussein. Why is it that so many people temporarily become religious, but as soon as they get to Istanbul airport and that first McDonald's goes into their mouth, what happens? All of their spirituality is gone. The example of us when we get to Istanbul is the example of the munafiqeen around the Prophet. As long as the Prophet was there, we were pious. The minute the Prophet's eyes close, what happens? That goes back to their true fitrah. Why is that? Because the nur of wilayah didn't penetrate the heart. This is why the Prophet is not the milak. Ali is the milak. Wilayah is the milak. But anyhow, look, it's always when you get to the engine warms up and the time slowly comes to an end. But look, we have a number of nights to discuss. If I may say though, the most important thing that we should be doing before we come here is to make that intention. The Zahra, you weren't in Karbala to cry for your Hussein. Today we're coming to cry over him. 70 different maqamat. Your tears, your azar, your love for Imam Hussein will help you. Least of all when Malakul Maut comes to you. From Barzakh to Sirat. These tears will benefit you. And Hussein is so Kareem, he says, even if you want to cry over something else, do it. Just make the intention. You're crying over us. Words of the 8th Imam, right? Make the intention you're crying over my jet. Yesterday we began this journey. So happens we've been given an extra day. That is also important. Perhaps in this extra day, somebody may want to change their destiny. They say that when the musibah of Ahlul Bayt is recited, this is when skies open up. You can't see it, but there are people who will say Ameen to every tear that drops, if only that sincerity is there. Look, let me say one more thing. Each of you sitting here is the dua Fatima Zahra. One broken-hearted mother prayed for all of you. Can I remind you of the time when she was pregnant? She'd cry. Comes to the Prophet, says, Father, this child inside of me makes me cry, makes me sad. He says, why does he make you sad for? He says he wakes up at night saying, Ya Ummi, Ana Ghareeb. Mother, I feel lonely. Some of you know how it is to feel lonely, right? Especially fathers. You know when a problem befalls you, you can't even cry in front of your children. Sometimes you can't cry in front of your wife. But you feel lonely, even if you're with so many people, but you feel lonely. It's a miracle that when you come to this majlis for the 15 minutes that we're here, no one feels lonely. Why? Because Hussein is ghareeb. Continues, says, Ya Ummi, Ana Madloom. Mother, I feel oppressed. Ya Ummi, Ana Atsha. Mother, I'm thirsty. Rasulullah told her what was going to happen. Look at the tradition. She says, but then I don't want a child if this is what's going to happen. No, Zahra, he's going to save this deen. But a mother's heart is a mother's heart, right? They say when she was passing away from this world, Amir al-Mu'mineen walks into the room. What does he see? Lifeless body of Zahra there. Goes, sits down, takes her head, puts it on his lap. Tears begin to fall on the face of Zahra. Says Zahra lifts her hand up and wipes Amir al-Mu'mineen's tears on her face. Imam asks, says, why are you doing this? You know what she replies? She says, my father said to me, when a madloom man cries, du'as become mustajab. Brothers, today no one's holding you back. There's no shimmer today. Just remember when Sakina would cry, what would happen to her? Honestly, if I could recite it. You know what Zahra then says? Look at the tradition and see, it breaks my heart. The only happy time she had in her life, she recalls it. Otherwise, her entire life is a masaib. She was a yatim at the age of 5. If you look at it, that she didn't have a mother, right? At the age of 5, tradition says a father is coming back. And as a father is coming from Taif, one 5-year-old girl is standing next to the door waiting for a father to come back. Rasulullah feels embarrassed. Why? Blood from head to toe, people had stoned him. He didn't want his 5-year-old daughter to see, but the 5-year-old daughter didn't want her father to feel embarrassed. What does she do? Zahra goes running. She was small though, so she could only put her arms around his knees. Says, Father, come down, comes down, takes the blood away from his face, wipes the tears from his eyes, said, if my mother Khadija's not here, Zahra is here. Maybe that may have reminded you of another girl waiting for a father to come back. You know what the tradition says? That small girl was also waiting. When she saw the horse come back, the reins were cut. She just says one thing. She says, Jawad, she says, Dhuljana, just tell me one thing. When my father was killed, did they give him water or not? What's Zahra saying? Is Amir al-Mu'min, do you? Allah will accept your dua. Why? Because we're talking about Zahra. It says at that moment, Amir al-Mu'minin is talking, a dialogue takes place. She says to him one thing, happiest moment of her life. She says, Ali, do you remember when Allah married me to you? Married me to you? Do you remember when the mahr was being fixed? Jibreel came, I remained quiet. Jibreel went back up. Allah says, I give Zahra the oceans, I remain quiet. Again, I give Zahra the lands, I remain quiet. Allah gave me all the lands and the dry and the oceans and everything. Do you remember what I wanted? Shafa for those people who cry over my Hussein. Today as your tears come, your Shafi Zahra. On that day of judgment when you need it, know the mother of Hussein will be there for you. What happens there? Then the discussion continues. Zahra says to Amir al-Mu'minin, she says, my Syed, if ever I've wronged you, forgive me. Amir al-Mu'minin bursts out crying, Zahra, what forgiveness is there? Comes to a point where she says, marry again, but don't neglect my children. After me, they'll feel very alone. Continues and says, and don't ever raise your voice. If you can try. This is not for Amir al-Mu'minin, by the way, this is for the Ummah. Don't ever raise your voice. Remember what Imam Hussein says to Khur. Lower your voice. Why is Zainab is here? A point comes, and this is the point I wanted to bring you towards. She says, and if ever my Hussein is thirsty at night time, get up and give him some water. This mother all of her life never forgot what her father said and what Hussein would say, Ya Ummi ana adshan. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at the caravan coming to Karbala. Yesterday we looked at the departure. There's one thing in between I wanted to mention. Many people don't mention this. I want to mention two small children. They say when Muslim bin Aqil came, he came with two small children. I'm going to accelerate it forward to what I want to say. They said when Muslim bin Aqil was captured, these two children ran. When they ran, they say one tradition says next to the water there was a tree. They got up on top of the tree and they were hiding there. When they were hearing voices, kill Muslim, slaughter Muslim, younger brother asked the older brother, which Muslim are they talking about? Older brother would try and hide it. Younger brother would say, brother, you can't even hide it from me. They're talking about our father. Time comes that a woman was coming forward. She sees a reflection in the water. She looks up. She says, who are you two young boys? You've come from far away. You don't look like you're from Kufa. Why don't you come? Both of them were trying to remain quiet. Eventually a time comes when both of the children said, they said, we're the sons of Muslim bin Aqil. She says, I'm also a Shia of Ali. Come to my house. Both children taken home. This woman had a son by the name of Harith. Harith was a mal'oon. For those people who have children, just imagine what Harith does. Tradition says both of these children try and go to sleep. As they lie down at night time trying to sleep, both of them see a dream. In that dream, Amir al-Mu'minin comes, says, son, come to me. Both of them open their eyes, they realize it's the final time. Harith is downstairs, speaking to his mother, saying, if I find those two children, I'm going to grab them and I'm going to take them. And I'm going to take them and I'm going to make sure that I get the reward from Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. When those two children start crying, he comes upstairs, sees that both of those children are there. Painful moment is this, he grabs them by the hair and he pulls them. Sakina wasn't the first person whose hair was grabbed. Whenever you go to Sayyid al-Ruqayya next, in the olden days, in the Ziyarat Nama, at the back there was a hadith there. In that hadith, it talks about the ghusl and kafan of Sayyid al-Ruqayya, Bibi Sakina. In that tradition it says that women ran out 3 times crying. The first time they ran out crying, They came to Imam Sajjad. They said that this girl has fungus growing on her body. Imam Sajjad said, this is not fungus. Shimr would beat her red and green. And second time they came was this. They said, but her skin starts coming off if we... Third time when they came running out, they said, this girl has a disease. Says, why? Says, whenever we pour water over her hair begins to shred. Imam says, that's not a disease. Shimr would grab her by the hair and pull her. Two of these children pulled her by the hair. I can't recite anymore and you can't hear anymore. He takes him to the river Euphrates, says to his slave, kill both of these kids. Slave turns around and said, I can't kill two sweet children like this. Two beautiful children like this. He says, if you can't, let me show you that I can. Takes out a sword, says, who wants to come first? Older brother comes forward and says, kill me first. My mother said to me, the oldest brother is like a father, kill me first. As he goes to kill him, the younger brother comes running and says, kill me first. Says, why? Says, my mother would say the youngest son is like a son, the youngest brother is like a son. He says, I'm going to kill both of you, but take off your shirts. Painful part comes there. Older brother takes off his shirt, younger brother begins to cry. Harith asks him, why are you crying for? Look at the reply. He says, I've never taken off my shirt before, my mother would take it off. Harith takes his sword, cuts both of the necks off. Takes both of the heads in a white container. As he gets to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad says to him, what's happened to this container? He says, it's the blood that I cut. He says, open up, I want to see the face. When he looked at the face, he said, why is the face red for like this? He says, when I cut them, blood splattered, but the redness is there when I slapped him on the face. Bring some water, bought some water, started clearing the face. In the similar tradition, hair starts coming down. Ask him why. Ibn Ziyad says, why is the hair coming down? I was grabbing him by the hair. Looked at him and said, what kind of a mal'oon are you? Look at the beauty of this face. Why is the teeth broken for? He said, I was hitting the... Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Mata min Hussain.